Please welcome Dr. Nicholas Joad, Director of Defence Science and Technology, UK Ministry of Defence.
Good morning to our US friends and good afternoon to those of you here in the UK. I'm Dr. Nick Joad. I'm the Director of Science and Technology for the UK Ministry of Defence. And my job is making sure that we can access the science and technology necessary to deliver our defence mission now and into the future, and also worry about our key S&T capabilities. I oversee the investment of MOD's core science and technology research and align it against the highest priorities. And as part of that, I also lead on key national and international relationships. And I've worked with the US for very many years, and I have to say, we have some fantastic collaborations with you. We always refer half-jokingly, but very fondly, to you as our cousins. Well, I actually do have quite a lot of American cousins. They're all in New York, so at some point I look forward to you telling me whether New Yorkers are actually representative of the rest of America, or whether they're a slightly strange breed. But one thing I always tell them is that actually the Atlantic is one of the narrowest oceans I've ever come across. So it's a joy to work with you and a real pleasure, and long may it carry on. One other reason why I was quite keen to come and talk at this event was actually the title. So it's about swarming drones, and I'm actually a beekeeper. And one of the things I have quite an interest in is what happens when you put 50 swarming, but relatively unsophisticated animals up against one other, slightly more sophisticated animal that's really rather intent on taking their honey. And I can tell you from quite bitter experience that actually a well-maintained and developed swarm is actually quite a thing to behold. And I think we've seen that in some of the work you guys have done today. So I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this showcase, and actually the planners for all the work they've done to make it happen. Competitions like this are not only fun, but they're a great opportunity to bring smart people together. And they're a great chance to actually push forward new generations of capability. I started my career as a technical person. I'm not sure what I am now with my job title, but one of the things that was true then was if you want good things to happen, get smart people together, give them a difficult problem to have a go at, and then get out of their way and let them get on with it. And I think we've really seen that happen over the course of this event. So thank you very much for that, and and I really look forward to the rest of the event. So, why do I care about AI? That might seem a strange thing to do when we're talking about an AI event like this, but artificial intelligence is fueling the fourth industrial revolution. It's changing almost every aspect of how we live our lives. And I looked up, where does the term artificial intelligence come from? And it was first coined during the 1950s at Dartmouth College in the US. And it arose at quite an exciting and startling time when technical innovation was being driven, actually at the end of the Second World War, in both our nations to exploit some of the foundations of modern computing that were delivered by Turing and his predecessors. And I do wonder, if someone from back then travelled through time and arrived now, what would they make of the way we're using our smartphones to navigate around town? How virtual digital assistants such as Siri help us work, and our addiction to social media? They might be surprised, or maybe not. Maybe they anticipated it all. But what's really clear is what's normal to us now would be utterly foreign to those pioneering scientists. And it's clear to see that artificial intelligence is now an integral part of our daily lives and becoming increasingly prevalent through the world. I'm sure you use some form of AI today, whether it be mapping or music selection or whatever it is. And I think it's probably fair to say that AI is here already, but its impact is probably only just starting to be felt. So let's think a little bit about the event that you guys have just gone through. And I'm going to start with a good quote, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. Prediction is difficult, especially about the future. So let's take a little bit of a step back and think about what this event has done. Now, one thing we have done in the UK, and actually I know you've done it in the US as well, is talk to some of our science fiction writers about the future. And they have some very quite profound insights because they actually understand the present in a way that sometimes we don't. And one of the greats of that genre was Arthur C. Clarke. And he usefully identified 3 rules about the future and future technology, which I'm sure you'll be pretty familiar with, but let me just remind you. So the first one is when a distinguished elderly scientist, now I'm not really distinguished and only my children think I'm elderly, but maybe I fall in that category, says something is possible, they're probably right. When they say something is impossible, they are probably wrong. So the second rule is the only way to investigate what is possible is to venture a little bit past the limit of possibility into the impossible. And then the last one Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I think what I've seen from the showcase event so far is you've really given me a load of evidence that the first two laws about the future are undoubtedly true. And that's really great to see. I'm pleased about that. The last one we'll come back to, because I think one of the challenges we have on artificial intelligence is all about explainability. So we'll talk about it a little bit later. So let's talk a little bit about what our nations and our governments are actually using AI for. And I'm going to start with a non-defence example in the UK. So artificial intelligence has been seen to match the experts in the diagnosis of eye disease. So about 2 years ago in 2019, the UK's National Health Service set up an AI laboratory to try and boost the utility of that technology across the NHS. And what we find there is quite an interesting application of AI, because it's an excellent example of AI amplifying human expertise in a particular area. So what we have is a clinician may only see a rare eye disease a small number of times in his career, but actually by harvesting AI in the right way, he can access, or she can access, hundreds of thousands of cases of experts looking at particular diagnoses. Now, that might not be magic. In fact, the algorithms are actually, very well understood, but it is certainly magical. Another example in that sort of area from a few years ago was the UK has started using techniques for identifying ISIS propaganda videos online. And actually, it's got a very high success rate of doing that and taking them down. And that's another example where not only are we using AI to do something that are better than a person could do, but we're actually doing it at a speed and scale that we could not hope to replicate with a system that if people did it. So that's another example where we're doing both better things, but we're doing things better as well. And AI should seek to do both of those. So I'm going to move a little bit closer now to defence. And I would slightly remind my American friends that defence is spelled with a C, not an S. And you should look that up in your dictionaries. We're already seeing the benefits from supporting decision-making with combat estimates, analysis of course of action, planning tools, threat warning systems, and we've applied that in air systems, minesweepers, and all sorts of autonomous vehicles. And that technology is ubiquitous, and you can see all of that in the press every day of the week. But I'd like to highlight something that our US colleagues have done, which back in 2016, they showed Eric Schmidt, when he was the CEO of Google, around a US Air Force military base in Qatar. And he noticed a load of airmen doing some planning with post-it notes and whiteboards for aerial refueling. And Schmidt helped them set up a team to apply, some of these advanced techniques. And it cost around $1 million, I believe. But it set up a system that saved the Air Force several millions of dollars every week in terms of fuel usage and actually, the cost of airborne refueling. And that's something we shouldn't forget when we're applying AI. Armchair generals always talk about tactics. And if you've been fortunate enough to talk to lots of real generals, which I do in my job, they don't talk tactics, they talk logistics. So this probably wasn't an example that made a big splash in the papers, but it illustrates that we can have really quite significant impact applying AI, both in revolutionary and evolutionary ways. We shouldn't forget what AI can do for the back office of our enterprises. Our defence enterprises are very large organisations that do an awful lot of things, and many of those things are in common with the commercial sector. So we should actually exploit what they have learned before us. So a little bit nearer in time, what else have we been doing in our armed forces? So the past year saw artificial intelligence demonstrated in the UK Army, alongside our international partners in NATO, in exercise Spring Storm in Estonia. This AI technology exploited vast amounts of data to give them a very rich situational awareness picture and give them enhanced command and control processes. And not only did it help the users understand what they could get and expect from AI, but it also marked the beginning of our ability to use AI to predict adversaries' behaviour as well. And that's quite a significant step change in our capabilities. And it's the sort of thing you are seeing in your competition-based endeavours at the moment. So let's move on to the sea and talk about the land. So during the NATO-led Formidable Shield earlier this year, Allied navies started using artificial intelligence at sea, which for the Royal Navy was the first time. And I'm sure I could make some rather cool jokes about the Navy, but I won't at that point. Our warships were taking part in collective efforts to detect, track and defeat all sorts of attacks from ballistic and supersonic ski-skimming missiles. And on that exercise, a couple of the Royal Navy ships, HMS Lancaster and Dragoon, used artificial intelligence machine learning monitoring to generate that air picture. And they provided real-time recommendations and alert. and actually provided part of that battle management process. Now, that was a slightly bittersweet experience for me because I started my career out designing anti-ship missiles, putting all sorts of techniques and tactics in there to make that job really difficult. So it was quite nice to see all of those things defeated with relative ease by some well-designed AI systems, but a little bit bitter at the same time. But one of the really remarkable things about that was actually how we managed to take that from the lab and actually put it, military capability, out into the field and tested it. So let's have a think about where all this stuff might be going. So artificial intelligence and AI-enabled autonomous capabilities are essential to defence transformation in the 21st century. They're going to accelerate the decision-making and the operational tempo. They're going to extend our range and our persistence and actually the mass of our capabilities. And what I mean by that is actually splitting out the capabilities across many platforms. They're going to do the usual things of undertaking dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks. And they also have the potential for significantly improving the efficiency and effectiveness and the affordability of our systems. They're also going to profoundly affect the way we approach some missions at the moment that require a lot of human intervention. And I'll pick one out here in terms of sort of photo and video analysis. That's one lesson we have learned over the years. That is a very, very analytic, expensive thing to have to do. And AI is particularly well suited to that. So we know defence is using AI all over the place. Actually, that's really well known. But what are the challenges to using AI? We know we need to pursue these technologies in order not to be left behind, but we also know that AI is going to have quite a profound impact on our society and our governments. And how we adopt and use AI can't just be the preserve of technical experts. It requires the involvement of people that worry about policy, communications, and delivery. And government, industry, and academia are going to have to work together to apply themselves to these systems and have a really keenly developed awareness of the potential benefits and drawbacks of that revolution. AI is not a silver bullet. There will always be some problems that require the creativity and thinking of real people. The effort and investment required to make AI systems work is very significant. Poorly designed artificial intelligence can lead to bad decisions or wider societal impacts. We actually face quite a difficult problem here. I know for a fact that you're all very skilled software engineers, and you'll have studied the great past software failures in the past, which have ranged from using sine instead of cone sine, which has brought down rockets, through in the UK, a rather sad one, which is poorly managed data stacks that actually sent a load of people to prison for fraud when it was nothing of the sort, just a badly designed system. The problems we face, by their very nature, are much larger and more complex. Well, in the UK, it's a Friday afternoon, and frankly, it's the end of quite a long week, so I'm not going to talk about all of the problems. I'm just going to pick 3 of them, and I'd ask you to think about. So the first one is data. Now, we all know data is the lifeblood of this technology, but we don't always have the data. The next real challenge we have is understanding what our systems do. Well, we might think that's a trivial problem, but being able to explain that to others and therefore gaining their trust that the system will do that and they will operate in the way we think they're going to. And then lastly, quite a strange one maybe to raise here is being certain that we are operating in an ethical way. There is a lot of baggage out in the wider society about what AI will and won't do, and we need to be quite aware of that. So if we go back to data, if you think about the problems where AI has been really, really successfully applied in digital assistants, web searches, social media algorithms, they're all areas with really rich and easily characterized data sets. And in fact, in many ways, they've been successfully applied because the developers have instrumented the system they're applying AI to. So they actually self-learn in quite a clever and sophisticated way. The challenge for us in government that we don't really have as much of that data as you might think. It's not necessarily well labelled or curated. We're going to need to instrument defence to collect all of that data in the way that our commercial predecessors have done. And where we don't have that data, and we can't get it through our day-to-day operations, we're going to have to find some ways of generating suitable training data, whether that's through synthetics or experimentation, whatever it is. How we understand, validate, and protect all of those data sets is really not trivial. So as we go through the development cycle, I'd really encourage you to think about what is the data you need, how are you going to get it, how are you going to maintain it, and how are you going to protect it. Now, talking about how you're going to protect things, let's talk a little bit about understanding and trust. Now, designing algorithms for machine learning is complex and time intensive, but for you guys, it's certainly fun. I think equally challenging is understanding how well they will work, how robust they are, and ensuring that they fail gracefully. And the back of all of that is convincing others that we do indeed understand all these things, and we can trust the systems we want to deploy. Now, in defence, we are going to have to do this under quite a high degree of scrutiny. The effectiveness of AI systems will tip the balance in future conflicts. That's undoubtedly true. And in defence, it is literally and sadly often a matter of life and death. We need to be comfortable with that. And we need to understand that AI development and fielding is a very intricate process. And we are going to need to bring together some multidisciplinary teams outside some of the areas that we're necessarily comfortable working with. So we will have to involve the policymakers, legal people, data scientists, the developers, AI analysts, and frankly, people that understand the sectors that we're working in. We need to make sure that each step we can explain this in very simple terms. Now, I have a whole set of things I could pitch here to do with, whether my elderly Scottish mother, who's quite short and actually quite deaf now, how are you going to explain it to her? And that's a bit of a challenge, but it's one we shouldn't actually shy from. You need to better explain how your systems work and why people should have trust in them. We then move on to things like, the accountability of the decisions. We need to have confidence that the programs and the systems do what they do. And if we don't have that assurance, I think there's going to be many places where we just won't be allowed to use AI. We also need to sort out the problem of responsibility. Who is responsible for some of these AI-based systems? Is it the person that procured it, the person that developed it, the person that used it? None of that is clear. And it's very different from the technology I started out using very early in my career. I did actually have a very wise PhD supervisor, and she put up with a lot supervising me in my PhD, but she had a very clear and very simple mantra. You only know whether you understand something when you write it down and try and explain what it does to other people. And that's one message I think I'd like to leave with you. We only get the trust of our warfighters or our societies if we can explain our systems. So coming back to Clarke's third law, this can be an area that's seen as magic. Let's make sure that our outputs are magical, but it's not magic in itself. Right, so lastly, rather thorny topic, but quite short, ethics. Ethics might seem a strange subject to talk about in an event like this, but we already know that AI in military matters is likely to be potentially problematic. Just too many people have seen the film Terminator for it to be any different. And from a wider societal perspective, whether such autonomous systems lower the threshold for conflict, increase the fog of war, make military actions less attributable to confusing who is responsible and what the chain of command looks like. These might seem like quite abstract issues, but it's worth looking back in the history of armed conflict. We already have highly autonomous systems in the service of both our nations. I mean, amazingly autonomous systems with amazing intelligence. They are our people. And we quite deliberately hold them to a very high ethical standard. And that's why we actually, do some of the things we do. We shouldn't let the AI systems that we introduce degrade that standard. Okay. So those are a few of the challenges, but let's not get wound up in the problems. We have many, many things we're going to get out of AI in the future. And there are some enormous opportunities in defence for productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness. So I guess my message to all of you is please just carry on going after those difficult problems for us. I hear from the organisers of this event that we've learned a great deal, and you've come up with some quite innovative ways of doing business. So that's always really great to see. Okay, so I thought I'd just highlight a few things that we've been doing in the UK about AI to give you a bit of context from this side of that very narrow ocean. So this year, I think Linda mentioned it before, the Defence Science and Technology Lab, known as DSCL for many of you, flew a small 20 drones of 5 different types. So that was one of the largest inhomogeneous UAV swarms flown in the UK. And it was done under the title "Many Drones Make Light Work," which again I approve of because it's got another beekeeping analogy in there, which is really great. So that was an 18-month program, and what we saw was over about 2 weeks we flew 200 missions. We had 5 different types of UAVs carrying 6 different payloads, basically under the control of a very small number of operators. And this really gave us quite a significant understanding on what it means to control a swarm and how you can do that. Off the back of some of those things that we've done, we're about to publish a defence AI strategy in the UK. And that really is all about identifying some of the issues we're going to have to manage as we go through that. It sets out our priorities and it demonstrates our commitment to the ethical and responsible use of AI. And it's really designed to signal to our suppliers and our good partners like you how we want to strengthen the UK technology base and promote security and stability on that global stage through developing some of those technologies. We've also just recently established a digital foundry in the UK, which will deliver sort of innovative and software-intensive capabilities, such as this. And we've set up, as part of that new foundry, a Defence AI Centre, which is aimed at generating a critical mass of expertise. And our vision is to make the UK, one of those world-leading centres of development of use of AI and AI-embedded systems. And we want to do that through our sort of world-class academic and industrial base. And again, what you'll see there is very much, this is a difficult problem. So it really is all about partnering and bringing people together. So we're really looking forward to working in the future. And I could point to many examples where that collaborative approach has really worked and borne fruit. And I really hope, and I actually have no doubt, knowing the relationship between our two nations, that will carry on being true. So I'm going to start wrapping up now. Much to the relief of the people running the hackathon. So I've talked about many of the barriers we need to overcome and the challenges, but this really is an exciting area that was very much in the way of opportunities. We need to overcome them and seize those opportunities. And I think the best way of doing that, that I've seen over many years, is a healthy blend of cooperation and friendly competition. And I've heard there's been pretty much cooperation and competition between the teams. And I'm really pleased to see that we've seen that here. That's been a really great thing to see. So I'm going to leave you with one last thing. AI offers considerable benefit and significant challenges. Future conflicts may be lost to one on the speed and effectiveness of the AI solutions we employ. And in order to get that right, we've got to overcome a lot more than just technical issues, some of which I've talked about today. Some of them really are quite profound. And I'll just leave you with one thought. It's not just bad data or algorithms that can end in failure. Sometimes the most important part of an AI-driven system is the person using it. So never lose sight of that, actually, that these systems are going to have people in them somewhere. And you need to figure out how they're going to interface with them and what they're going to do with them. So thank you very much for your time today and your involvement in the showcase. And I think we're drawing to pretty much a natural conclusion. I hope you'll find the time to reflect on what you've learned and make sure that we've learned it too, and how we can use that insight to push forward what we have to do. We face a lot of challenges, but some really interesting opportunities in this area. So it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I wish you very much the best for the remainder of the event. And at that point, I will hand back.